All right, guys, let's take a look at a couple more. So we're doing whole numbers divided by decimals. So we're going to use our fade strategy that we talked about. So first step in fade is turn it into a fraction. So we have 6 being divided by 24 hundredths. All right, next step, A. So our next step with A would be away with the decimal points. All right, so to get rid of this decimal point, I need to move the decimal 2 spots over. So I'm going to be multiplying it by 100. If I do that to the bottom number, I need to do it to the top number as well for it to stay an equivalent fraction because I need not to change. I'm multiplying it by 1. 100 over 100 is equal to 1. So when we multiply this, I've got 600 over 24. All right, that takes us to our next step. Divide. All right, well, that's easy enough. So now we're doing 600 divided by 24. So 600 divided by 24. All right, well, right off the hand, I don't know offhand a bunch of my 24 facts. So I've got 24 and 24 makes 48 plus another 24 makes what? 272. Another 24 is 96. So that's 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, and 4 groups. All right, so let's do our division. So let's start with, it looks like times 2 is 48. So let's do times 20 to make it 480. I've got 120 left. All right, well, if I do times 4, that'll be 96. When I subtract that, we'll go through and do our steps. 5, that's 11. Oops, that's 4. It's going too fast on that one. That leaves me with 24. I have 1 more group in there. When I subtract, nothing left over. This is how many groups we made. There are 25 total groups. And once again, like last time, this worked out evenly. So this divides out into 25. So there are 25 groups of 24 hundredths in 6. Or another way of saying it, the easier way, 6 being divided by 24 hundredths is 25. All right, we're going to take a look at one more. Now, this should look a lot easier. We're doing 3 divided by 4 tenths. On the surface, it looks like it should be an easier problem. So we do the same steps that we've been doing, fade. So fraction is our first step. So 3 being divided by 4 tenths. Okay, easy enough. Away with the decimal. Okay, since this is in tenths, I need to multiply it by 10 to move the decimal over. If I do it to the bottom, I've got to do it to the top, so it's an equivalent fraction. So I have 30 being divided by 4. Now I actually do the division. All right, 30 being divided by 4. All right, so taking a look at it, 30 divided by 4, I know 4 times 7 is 28, and this is where things get trickier. I have a remainder left over. So we were working with fractions right here, so it should stay a fraction. So I'm still doing the 2 being divided by 4. So it's 7 2/4. Now the problem is, this is where we get to that E in fade. Sometimes you have to find an equivalent decimal point because the odds are if we were working with decimals, they're going to give you answer choices that are decimals. Now some of you might know what 2/4 is as a decimal right away, and some of you might not. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to turn this into a decimal number. Now, we don't do that a lot, but you did it a lot in 4th grade. In 4th grade, you were supposed to be able to take any fraction that was over tenths, over hundredths, or over 1,000 and turn it right into a decimal. So if we can change this fraction into tenths, hundredths, or thousandths, we'll be ready to go. So you have a lot of ways of doing this. You could take a look at it and say, well, I can't turn 4ths into tenths, but I can turn it into hundredths by multiplying it by 25. And then you can multiply the top and bottom by 25 and turn it into hundredths. Or you could play around with it a little. We could look at it and say, you know what, 2/4 I know is the same thing as 1/2. And I know 1/2 is the same thing as 5 tenths. All right, well, 5 tenths you can turn into a decimal. 5 tenths is 5 tenths. It's the exact same thing. So my end answer would be 7 5 tenths. So when we look at it, I've got 7 5 tenths as my end answer. Now, this is a little bit trickier. This is not going to come up very often, but you guys were really, really good at manipulating fractions. So I think this is still going to be a valid strategy for you to do. This doesn't come up often, like I said, but I do think you guys will do really well with it. You remember your goal, though. If you end up with some fraction left over, you want to get it to some point where it's equal to tenths, hundredths, or thousandths. One other quick strategy I could have done to get it there, this one's a little bit harder, but if I didn't know my fractions as well, I could have said, well, what if I multiply it by 10 over 10? All right, then I end up with 2/4. That would be 20 40ths. Okay, now I'm trying to get 40ths to be tenths. Okay, well, I could divide the top and bottom by 4. All right, because 40 divided by 4 is 10, and then 20 divided by 4 is 5 tenths. It could have gone a longer way to do it. Really, it just comes down to playing with the numbers and trying it out and getting this fraction back to a decimal point by getting it to tenths, hundredths, or thousandths, somewhere where it's easy to manipulate. All right, we'll give this a shot today with your work, and hopefully if you get it, great. If you don't, I'll see you at 9:30 or 2:30.